Very few Roman emperors left a legacy as impactful as Theodosius I, known to many as Theodosius the Great. If he was truly a great emperor or not, it greatly depends on who you ask. Some of his decisions certainly contributed to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Others were very correct strategic moves at a time Rome faced many external and especially some serious internal threats. The 16 very eventful years of his reign, between 379 and 395 AD, saw the fall of paganism and the rise of Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire, the beginning of the permanent settlement of Germanic peoples into Roman lands, the end of the supremacy of the Roman army as the empire was completely exhausted of human resources, needing to rely on its new Germanic allies for troops and leadership, and during his reign, it would be the last time that the Eastern and Western empires would be ruled by a single emperor. There's quite a lot to cover, and I've brought 3 beautiful coins of Theodosius to help us discuss his reign. One of gold, one of silver, and one of bronze. So, let's get started. And before we continue, let me say a few words about today's sponsor, Bidder.com. Would you like to start collecting ancient coins? Or maybe you already collect, but would like to add new pieces to your collection? Bidder is an online auction platform that connects you with world-renowned numismatic auction houses in real time. Bidder offers a seamless, secure, and user-friendly experience for your desktop or mobile device that takes care of every aspect of participating at a coin auction: registration, pre-bidding or live auctions, and even payment. They also enforce a strict standard of trust, expertise, and communication from their partner venues, meaning you can rest assured you're bidding on reputable, professional venues, selling authentic coins. I have been a user of Bidder for many years now, and many of my own coins were purchased using their platform, and I can't recommend them enough. Visit Bidder.com and get started on the exciting world of ancient numismatics. Now, to understand Theodosius and the things he did, we need to take a step back to the disastrous decades right before his rise to power. During the 360s and 370s AD, the empire was in serious peril. The rise of constant usurpers and internal revolts forced the previous Valentinian dynasty to be constantly at a state of war, needlessly spilling Roman blood at a time the empire was already weakened. Daring attacks from the tribes beyond the border penetrated deeper and deeper into Rome's territory, destroying much of an already impoverished economy. The Romans didn't understand at the time why the barbarian invasions had become so frequent and so aggressive, but to the northeast, at the area of roughly modern-day Ukraine and Western Russia, the Huns were on the march, mercilessly pushing the peoples of that region further and further west. The peoples beyond the Limes were not attacking out of greed, they were being pushed, moved by desperation. The situation became critical between the years 376 and 378. A massive wave of Goths requested to be allowed into the empire. The Emperor Valens accepted, but the treatment given to these Goths, desperate and impoverished from the local Roman leaders, was so appalling that they rose in open revolt. Valens thought he could take care of these insolent barbarians by himself, meeting them in the Battle of Adrianople, one of the most humiliating defeats in Roman history, which led to the emperor's death and the ravaging of much of Eastern Rome's legions. The surviving emperor, Gratian, needing a competent replacement, picked Theodosius, the son of one of his most trusted generals, also called Theodosius, as his new imperial colleague. The first of Theodosius' controversial decisions is a good clue for us to talk about the first coin of today, this lovely gold solidus struck at Sirmium. The new emperor understood the Gothic issue, had to be dealt with more tactfully. He did not have the resources nor the soldiers to stop the outraged Goths from pillaging Roman territory or just, kicking them out. So he enlisted the Goths as foederati, in a way, independent subjects of the empire. He ceded the territory of Moesia Inferior to the Gothic coalition, and in this area, they would be an autonomous political entity without having to integrate to Roman society, under the only condition that they protected the Roman frontier and provided assistance to Rome's armies when called upon. Now, foreign soldiers fighting alongside Romans wasn't anything new. The Romans understood some of their own weaknesses in military affairs, and throughout the imperial period, they used specialized foreign troops quite extensively. Cavalrymen from Africa and Gaul, archers from Crete and Syria, skirmishes from Iberia. These auxiliary troops, called auxilia, worked alongside the Roman legionaries, and they were a key part of what made the Roman army highly flexible and effective. These auxilia were integrated into the Roman command system, so they became an integral part of the highly organized Roman war machine. Now, things were different. These Gothic troops would fight as their separate national troops under their own leadership and under their own fighting doctrines, quite different to the highly organized and disciplined imperial army. The ranks of the imperial army itself were also so depleted that, starting on the 4th century, but especially after Theodosius, we would see more and more high-ranking officials, generals, and much of even the low-level soldiers coming from these foederati tribes. Some call this process the barbarization of the Roman imperial army. If the presence of these foreign peoples in the ranks was itself the reason for the deterioration of army discipline and fighting style, it is up for debate. However, what we do know is that this generated a series of conflicts of interest and inefficiencies that jeopardized the defense of the empire. The foederati troops fought in a different way and were less loyal than the imperial army. And the imperial army itself, now with high-ranking officers of foreign origin, did not always have the best interest of Rome in mind. The end result was an army that fought less efficiently as a cohesive unit, and soldiers with conflicting interests, making usurpations and revolts even more likely. Soldiers were mostly paid in silver and gold. The most prized coin was the solidus, the main unit of value for the late Roman Empire. Any foederati or imperial soldier would have been very happy to receive one of these, and in Theodosius' time, one of these coins represented more than an entire month's worth of wages. As we can see on the obverse, we have a rather stylized and unrealistic portrait of Theodosius, typical of the coinage of the late Roman Empire. At this time, coinage wasn't really praised for its realism like in previous centuries. However, we have quite a lot of details on the portrait, like this lovely pearl diadem the emperor now used, and his robes are held in place by a jeweled fibula, like a brooch. You can see it next to his neck. On the legends, we have his regnal name, Dominus Noster, meaning our Lord, Theodosius, Pius Felix, something like dutiful and blessed, Augustus, emperor. On the reverse, we have a clear representation of the violent times Rome was living through. The design is dominated by a large image of the emperor wearing full battle armor, stepping over a captive. Very violent, militaristic scene. After all, most subjects of the empire wanted, first and foremost, a competent general in charge. On one hand, he holds a labarum, a military standard, and on the other, an orb with a small victory, crowning the emperor with a laurel wreath. This is actually quite fitting for Theodosius. He was a particularly good general. Both to the left and the right of the emperor, we have the letters S and M for Sirmium Moneta, the mint of Sirmium, located on what is modern-day Serbia, and quite close to the territory the Goths were allowed to settle. I wonder if this coin was once in the possession of maybe a Goth mercenary fighting for the empire. The legends read, Victoria Augustorum, the victory of our emperors. Interesting point. There are 3 G's in the Augustorum, right at the end of the legends, meaning there were 3 reigning emperors, namely Theodosius on the east, Gratian on the west, and the young Valentinian II, Gratian's young brother, maybe aged 8, 10 years old, placed in Rome as a representative of Gratian. Finally, under all of that, we see the abbreviation COMOB, C-O-M-O-B, for Comitatensis Obrisiacum, which roughly translates to refined gold issued and guaranteed by the imperial authority. Next, let's check out this siliqua, a silver coin. 24 of these were necessary for you to get 1 solidus. This coin helps us illustrate one of the best, I would say, achievements of Theodosius, which was to stamp out, at least temporarily, the series of usurpations that were constantly plunging the empire into civil wars, and contain the deluge of enemies attacking Rome from all sides. Theodosius managed to broker a peace deal with the Sasanians to the east, as an invasion from the Persians at this time would have been absolutely disastrous, and internally he managed to fold 2 major usurpation attempts. One from a general coming from the island of Britannia called Magnus Maximus, who managed to kill his co-emperor Gratian, and later another usurpation by a man called Eugenius, backed by a general of Frankish origin, Arbogast. I told you putting barbarians as generals would lead to problems. I told you. This second usurpation would lead to the death of Valentinian II, leaving Theodosius as the sole ruler of the empire. However, as there's always a bad side to something good, Theodosius, after defeating all of the usurpers and seeing himself as the sole ruler of the empire, decided to establish his own dynasty, decreeing that once he died, the empire would be split between his sons, Arcadius on the east and Honorius on the west, and both were terrible emperors. Arcadius was a sickly young man, unable to do much good before he died at the age of 31, and Honorius was a spoiled palace prince. He did not have any interest to rule the empire or curb the rampant corruption that plagued the imperial administration. He stayed most of his life in his palace in Ravenna, letting other people rule the empire for him, and it was during his reign that Rome was sacked in the year 410, an event he did not seem to be particularly worried about. So back to our coin here. This siliqua was issued at the city of Trier, when Magnus Maximus was in charge of the western half of the empire, between 383 and 388. It was actually a pretty long-lived and successful usurpation. Theodosius couldn't immediately march on Maximus, and showing a remarkably cold head, he chose to temporarily recognize Maximus as emperor, while he gathered enough troops and allies to muster an army of sufficient size to ensure his campaign was successful. Maximus issued siliqua like this in his name as well as in Theodosius' name, which is this example. Maybe an attempt to legitimize his rule by representing himself as a colleague of Theodosius. But of course, Theodosius wasn't having any of that. On the obverse, we have a bust of Theodosius, although the only reason we know this is Theodosius is because of the legends. Once again, Dominus Noster Theodosius Pius Felix Augustus. Coins issued under the name of Magnus Maximus had the exact same portrait, only the legends were different. As for the visual elements of the bust, it is very similar to the solid we've seen earlier, just in smaller size. The siliqua is a rather small coin, it weighs just over 2 grams. As for the reverse, we have a different design, an image of the goddess Roma, in case Dea Roma, seated on her throne, wearing a helmet, carrying a scepter and an orb, symbolizing her rule over the known world. Well, that would be changing in a century or so. Rome wouldn't be victorious anymore. Around her, we have the legends. Virtus Romanorum, the virtue, the value of the Romans. Although virtus at this time was more associated with the idea of manliness, of resilience to adversity. And finally, at the bottom, we have a mint mark, TRPS, which stands for Treveri Pecunia Secunda, or the second workshop of the Mint of Treveri. Lovely coin. It's so hard to find siliqua from this time period in such great shape. And finally, with this last bronze coin, we have to touch on some of the most controversial topics of Theodosius' reign. His religious reforms and his constant exploitation of the common people by the manipulation of the value of small change. Theodosius was the emperor to finally convert the empire's official religion to Christianity. The trend, of course, started with Constantine over a century earlier, but Theodosius was the one who made it official. This was not only a symbolic move. With the empire's conversion, a series of edicts were enacted, cutting funding and banning many traditional pagan religious rites, barring any non-Nicene Christians from official positions, and we could argue the emperor maybe turned a blind eye to the widespread destruction of many pagan temples and places of worship throughout the empire. The church was in fact so powerful and exerted such an influence on the emperor that by that time there was a famous episode. There was a massacre at a city called Thessalonica where a lot of civilians were killed. The circumstances of the massacre are still debated, but the bishop of Milan, of Mediolanum, blamed the emperor for the incident and banned him from receiving Holy Communion, forcing him to humiliate himself and make him serve 8 entire months of penance. Theodosius also commonly engaged in the manipulation of the value of bronze coins in order to artificially increase the monetary supply available to the imperial treasury. Gold and silver coins were hard currency. A solidus was worth its weight in gold. A siliqua was always worth a fraction of the solidus. Bronze coins, however, were valued in a unit of account called a denarius. Sometimes it's also called a denarius communis. The name reminds us of the silver coin from the Republican and early imperial periods. However, now we're talking about a mere unit of account. One of these bronze coins was worth multiple of these abstract denarii. We in fact aren't even sure how many denarii this particular coin we have here, called a decargyrus, was worth. It's likely that the value of the solidus in relation to these coins continuously rised, maybe on a monthly basis. Inflation was really bad. And the emperor could issue bronze coins to pay for troops and any payments made to the general public. They could also increase the value of coins with a simple imperial decree. However, tax collectors demanded taxes to be paid in gold or silver, which means that if you were poor, which was the majority of people, the coins you used in your everyday transactions, which was mostly bronze, was continuously devaluing coinage, ravaged by inflation. And once it was time to pay your taxes, you had to pay a hefty premium to exchange your bronze coins for gold and silver. This effectively siphoned purchasing power from the lower classes to the army, to the imperial institutions, and anyone rich enough capable of hoarding gold and silver. The trust in bronze coins was so low that barter and payments in the form of actual goods was very common at the time. So let's have a closer look at this decargyrus. The coin might have been an instrument of financial manipulation, but at least it's a very pretty coin. Check out this bust of the emperor wearing a mix between a jewel diadem and a helmet, a crested helmet, as he holds a shield and a spear as if ready for battle. There's much more wear in this coin if compared to the gold and silver ones we've seen. And I mean, of course, everyone would rather spend this coin, continuously devaluing coin, before spending their very valuable gold and silver. As for the legends, once more, we have the traditional formula for Theodosius. Dominus Noster Theodosius Pius Felix Augustus. On the reverse, we have this very interesting scene of the emperor, once again wearing full military attire, just like in the Solidus. He's aboard a galley, raising his hand as in a saluting gesture, and he's crossing a river. And there's a small victory rowing for the emperor. To the left of the emperor, we have a small laurel wreath, probably a control mark for the issue, and the legends read, Gloria Romanorum, the glory of our emperor. Underneath, we once again have the mint mark, Antiochia Gamma, or the third workshop of the Antioch Mint. This was the last large, good-looking bronze denomination struck by the empire. His sons would demonetize this kind of denomination early in their reign, and the bronze coinage of the later empire, it basically collapsed due to inflation. It became these minuscule, pitiful bronze coins we called Numi, which weighed like less than a gram of copper and lead mixed. They're pretty pathetic coins. So, there we have him, Theodosius. For some, Theodosius the Great. For others, simply Theodosius I. You can love him, you can hate him, but we can't deny his involvement in the spread of Christianity throughout Europe and other areas controlled by the empire had a very significant influence in Western culture. If it wasn't for him, history might have turned out very differently. Like, for example, Europe in the Middle Ages would have looked completely different, and who knows what kinds of ramifications it would have had on the modern day. Okay, now I want to hear from you. Do you have a coin of Theodosius? Do you consider him the Great or not? Let us know in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed yet another episode. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Consider becoming a member of the channel. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.